The following podcast is sponsored by Words and Pictures Comics, located at 2610 Center Street, number 6. Words and Pictures is your one-stop shop for vintage back issues and cutting-edge graphic novels. Awesome service, great shop. Check them out. I can finally say, welcome everyone to episode 236 of Just Joshing. I am your host, Joshua Pentalaresco. I write stuff and podcast too. Today, my guest is Russell Nohelty. Russell is a comic book creator, writer. He's about to undergo a massive campaign on Amazon. He has been very successful in a lot of his endeavors, and he's learned an awful lot from his failures. This conversation is oddly fitting for what I'm about to do with Patreon, as my Patreon page will be starting literally 24 hours from now. And I'm nervous as hell. I really am. I have no idea what's going to happen on Friday. Maybe no one's going to donate. Maybe I'm going to get $1,000. Maybe I'm going to get nothing. I don't know. I'm just scared and scared and Peter Parker scared and nervous and great. But no matter what, it begins this Friday. This Friday I released content exclusively to Patreon. My first blog just for the Patreon is going to be up and running. I'm also right now I'm recording my first audio podcast exclusively for Patreon as well. Like I said, I'll give you all that information at the end. But yeah, I'm nervous, I'm excited, and as I felt that since I'm about to undergo a radical new beginning, Russell's about to do the same with his books, I thought this would be the perfect way to start this era off. So let's just get to it, shall we? So, anyway, so the recorder is officially on. So if you've got anything incriminating you'd like to say, make it good.
What do you use for your recorder, out of curiosity?
Audacity.
Okay.
Yeah. No, so it just so happens that, see, I'm poor. Now I'm starting to get to the point now where things are growing with the podcast, so I'm already looking at improving everything, to be honest with you, from my computer to software. Like, Audacity is always going to be a useful tool to have. It's a great system. Whoever designed it was a genius. But I mean, there's just things I want to do to improve it, like my Spider Robinson interview. I mean, the fact is Audacity doesn't have the ability to deal with echo. Just doesn't. Now I say it gets certain plugins, and those plugins cost money. But I mean, but the thing is, the program itself just can't do it. But the thing about it is there are other programs that are better. It's just the way it is. And like anything else, as you keep going deeper and deeper into the stuff you're doing, right? You try to get better in as many different ways as you can. Just makes sense, right?
No, I mean, I had a 200 episode podcast myself. And we used Audacity for editing, and then I used MP3 Skype recorder for recording, but I kept it. I mean, basically my whole setup is what I have now, which is a Blue Yeti, a pop filter, and Audacity.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing what you can accomplish with very little, honestly. It really, really is. But apparently people think I'm good at this, so, and it seems to be taking me in some interesting directions. So if I'm going to do it, I got to keep constantly looking to get better. And, you know, I don't know about realistic or unrealistic expectations, but I do know that as I keep going, it seems like more people listen. So I must be doing something right. So
that's good. That's why I stopped doing mine, because we peaked at about 250 an episode. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this for 250 people. Like, it's just too much work. But then in the past year, what ended up happening was, like, so many people had asked me about the podcast. And I was like, where were you, like, a year ago when I was recording it to, like, echoes?
Yeah, well, it's in my case, I was thinking about that last year, and then I got nominated, and I won, which blew me away. And it's like... Right, it's open doors, right, and so as a result, it's like, and it's like anything else too. I noticed there's a growth. Like for me, last year I broke 400 views downloads per episode, like per week, right? I do 2 episodes a week, so it's not terrible at all. And it's like I said, it went down when I focused on going to my day job full time for a little bit, and now it's starting to go back up again. So the way I see it is, I'm creating more outlets, and people seem to be wanting to come on do this show now. So it's like it's just a growing thing, and now I'm just going to try and see where I can actually take it in terms of sponsors and in terms of. I have a plan. I think I figured out a way to how to grow this podcast in a way that won't compromise it too much. So as a result, I figure, why not go for it? I mean, it's been growing steadily. The growth has been constant. So you might as well just see where it can take you.
Right. No, yeah. I mean, I'm gonna be relaunching my podcast at some point in the near future, whenever I can. That's part. Been doing this week is I'm trying to figure out how I can make room for both things that I do, because one of them, I'm a writer. You know, I'm releasing 18 books this year, and I plan to release 18 more projects next year.
That reeks of a certain kind of insanity. I compliment the drugs you're on. I mean,
so I don't know. So the fact is that, like, unless you're making a lot of product, there's no way to break through on Amazon.
No, there's not.
There's no unless you're making a huge amount of product, there's no way to break through and, like, get yourself be heard in a world that, like, doesn't care about you. So the only way to break through that is to release just a ton of books at the same, like, very close on top of each other.
Yeah, I've been noticing this as a trend with Amazon, is that it's almost like the stock market is in the United States now. All the algorithms seem to be based on speed, right? And there's definitely something to that, right? You can definitely and there are definitely ways to make the products vary in size, shape, length, all that stuff, and like I said, sometimes you get very lucky. I know guys like Craig DeLuey have done very, very well with their books on Amazon, and they don't publish like that schedule. Some people just break through for whatever reason. But by and large, lots of people are coming up with, like, releasing 5 books at once, 10 books at once, 18 books at once, and everybody, and lots of people have plans on doing it. We talked about realistic real quick. The only thing I look at with that is, as far as that goes, I mean, how long can you maintain that schedule? Even if you're writing full time, that's an incredible amount of work. I mean, in terms of quality control and things of that nature, that would be a never-ending strain of balance.
Yeah, so it is a never-ending strain of balance, and one of the things that I did a couple of times. So, because I don't have a lot of books on Amazon now, you know, I'm a pretty successful author, but my book sales come from Kickstarter and not shows. So I don't have a lot on Amazon now, which allows me to experiment. So I've been doing books that are, like, books in 3 parts. So, like, I'll do 3 30,000-word novels that all, like, add up to one novel, so that I can eventually release it as one novel as well. I'm writing a serial this year, so that's 10 to 15,000 word novels.
Okay, that makes sense.
And all of them are going to add into one piece. It was popular several years ago, and it seems to be making a resurgence. And then I do, like, little novellas also, like single-use novellas that are all built on the concept that you can read them in any order, and they happen in the same universe. And and that's
really cool, actually.
I hope so. Now, my goal is this, that I have 12 novels right now. Each of them are trilogies that build on each other and happen at different periods in a 10,000-year span, or 13,000-year span of one universe. But the reason I did 4 different trilogies is because I want to be able to promote one per season in perpetuity them into the others.
Yeah.
So one is a dark fantasy series, one is more epic fantasy, one is contemporary fantasy, and one is space fantasy.
Nice.
So my hope is that for, let's say, what ends up happening when you only have one series is people get burnt out on it, right?
Oh yeah.
So my theory is that if I did this properly, in let's say January to March, I can promote one series, and that will have sell through to the next series, and then each series will have sell through to the other one. But people will never be too burnt out on one series as I'm promoting them.
It's not a terrible plan. I mean, even with that, I realistically, I look at what I feel like I can comfortably do. I can release, I got a 50,000 word novel that's almost ready to go. I have my Greek mythology Alice in Wonderland epic poem / prose series, and those are going to be done independently. I got something I'm going to try to do for the Big Five, and I got a couple other things in the back burner as well. But I'm also I mean, one of the things I'm conscious of is I from Amazon, with the Amazon algorithm, my big concern is I have a lot of friends that do a lot of different things. It's just the burnout of it, because it's quality versus speed. And the thing is, I get it too, because the big money and for most authors, and most of them don't realize it, is your backlog. Because the more you write, the more people see that you've done books, the more seriously you're taken. And then on top of that, what happens is, if someone likes your space opera, for example, or a space fantasy, and they see that you've done an urban fantasy or a contemporary fantasy, they might check it out out of curiosity, right? And in so doing, they might check out your other books if they keep liking what they're reading, right?
Well, and this is what's happened to me throughout my career. Are we on now?
Oh yeah, we've been on it. Oh yeah.
Okay, so what's happened in my career is I've seen people jump genres for me much more than most people say is possible.
Yeah.
So I've had people that have followed me from comics, from mystery to epic fantasy, from epic fantasy to horror, from horror. Like, I've had people that have read a lot of people. Like,
yeah.
Many people. And there's this idea that, people don't read anything else than what they like. And I don't know if that's true. I do think that people go through phases in their life where they are, let's say they read all sorts of epic fantasy for like a year. But eventually they burn out on epic fantasy, and then they want something else, and maybe something else will catch their eye. Maybe they'll read Piers Anthony, or maybe they'll read Stephanie Meyer, or maybe they'll read Ursula Le Guin, or somebody else.
Yeah.
And then they'll become obsessed with some other type of fantasy, or maybe they'll be obsessed with science fiction. Maybe they'll read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and that will consume them for a year. And then they'll look for other stuff like that. So while I do think that people do like the thing they like, I also think that they get burnt out on reading the same thing. And they like to have an author that can bridge to another genre, which is a better long-term strategy, I think, but it's not a great short-term strategy, because in order to get people into one series, you need probably about 5 books before you can start running ads to it.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense. I look at Dan Simmons. Like, Dan Simmons to me is the example of an author that can write virtually anything he wants. He does horror, he does science fiction, he does fantasy, he does a few other things, and he does also contemporary, the literary fantasy as well. And he's done well in everything he's done, simply because his writing just translates very well. I think that's very much a traditional mindset of thinking. Like, if you get a traditional book deal, right? Okay, you are that fantasy person, you are that young adult person, you are that, whatever you are. And people tend to get stuck. Now, again, it's a weird. I look at someone like Orson Scott Card, right? How many Ender books has he written? How many Alvin Maker books has he written? And I know, he's written a few other things as well. But that's the publisher going to him. We want to see books like this because these books we know will sell, right? But the reality today is, though, if you're going stuff on your own, you can try anything you want to, really. My personal belief is that whatever you're writing tends to probably on some level reflect the creator themselves, and we grow and we change and we evolve all the time. So it makes sense that one day you'd write, space fantasy, and then the next you might write an epic fantasy, and then the next a mystery, and then maybe the next something else. Because honestly, we don't we shouldn't as people stay stagnant. So why would our books?
Well, I do think that when you look at somebody like Mark Dawson, he's written 20 or so books in the same series. Yeah. It does definitely help when you're marketing to have one book and then allow you to go into a big long series. It's absolutely important. I call that the signature series, 9 books, something that you're going to be able to run ads to constantly and always know you're going to make money, because you're not going to make money on writing ads to one book. I do know people that do make money running ads to one book, but it's not a lot of people. And also, the amount of people who between genres, at least in the short term, ends up being very small.
Yes.
So there are when somebody is in the middle of, let's say, the reverse harem's a big thing now. So they're reading a bunch of reverse harem books. If you say, hey, go check out my thriller mystery series, the amount of people who are going to take that on are going to be way less than someone that says, read another book in this exact series.
Absolutely.
So from the short-term marketing perspective, you're shooting yourself in the foot. The problem lies when people only think in short term. When you think of the long term, and you as a reader, I have read so many different things in my life. I've gone in mystery phases and science fiction phases. I've gone to phases where I only read one author, whatever that author did. And it's nice when you can find an author who you trust, who also writes in another genre. That being said, it is not a great short-term strategy.
No.
Because of all the reasons that we just talked about. In order to make it, to have a successful author career as an indie, you really need to have one big, massively long series in order to be able to keep eyes on it and keep being able to run ads to it. However, there's just a difference between your 1-year career and your 10-year career.
Absolutely. No, it makes total sense. I look at I have a buddy, Brent Nichols. He does military sci-fi. He has that series can go on and on and on in perpetuity, and that's where he makes a lot of his money. He does other things too, but that's his signature. Every year he's going to release another thing in that series, or maybe 2 books in that series, because that's where he's making his living as an author, right? And it makes total sense. But and I've had this conversation with Fonda Lee. You can jump genres, but it's a matter of transitioning. So when you talk about your arc, your fantasy stuff for this year, they're all different, but they're kind of in the same vein. So if someone wants to take a jump with you, it's a gradual jump. It's not like you're going from, like you said, reverse harem to thriller. It's you got a regular fantasy series to an epic fantasy series to to a space fantasy series. They're stretching your boundaries out, but they're doing it gradually, right? It's not like a sudden jolt from one thing to the other, right? So
so here's one thing that I will say about most authors is, I'm just going to say this, it's going to sound mean, but I'm going to say it anyway in the most brutally honest way possible. Most authors are interchangeable with each other because they're writing books that are so similar that, and especially with Amazon where you don't see pictures or things with people, it's so easy to forget the author is even different when you read, and when you're so focused on a market or writing to market, it prevents you from being the brand. Suddenly your book is the brand. And while that is a good strategy for some people, I want me to be the brand, because I know maybe one day I'll want to write military sci-fi, but that day is not today, and that day probably won't be for the next 5 years. So it's a different mindset as far as, like, if someone really loves their military sci-fi world. Like, I was listening to, I think it was Craig Martell on a podcast, and he was saying that he was bringing in other authors to deal with in his universe and all of that other stuff. And when you have that business plan, like when you know you have a universe that's saleable and you just want to get books out there, and you can partner with other people and you can co-author with other people, and like the brand that you're trying to promote is the universe, it's a lot different than someone like me whose brand is me as an author. So, like, it's very hard for me to co-write with somebody or let somebody write things in my universe because people are buying me. And there's, you know, a certain kind of fan is going to come to me, and it's a fan who likes many different genres that are written in the way that I write things, as opposed to someone who goes to a universe and they don't care so much the author of that universe. They just want to live in that universe. It's sort of, I want to live in that universe versus I want to live in the universes that this author creates. Does that make sense?
Yes. No.
And you kind of have to know where you want to go. But here's the thing about people that are new in their career is they do not take advantage of the fact that nobody knows that they exist. What I mean by that is they do not try things. They are not experimenting nearly as much as they should as a young career author. So I'm having this sort of interesting time right now where, because I don't have many novels out, but I am a mid-career author in comics and such, I'm able to understand the benefits of experimentation. So, for instance, I was able to write 30 to 40,000 word novellas, and I was able to try novels in 3 parts, and I was able to try doing a serial, and I was able to try all of these things because the opportunity cost for me to do it is my time. I don't have a huge fan base of authors on Amazon or other of readers on other platforms that are waiting for my next military science fiction book. And when you're a mid-career author who has a long-term series, there is a lot of pressure to put on that you put on yourself and that the fans put upon you. But also there's a lot of financial pressure to write that next book because you know that writing that next book is going to make you more money. As a younger author, you do not have that financial pressure. You can write mystery and horror and literally everything under the sun. You can write long novels, short novels. You can write short stories. You can do everything because there is not the financial pressure to succeed. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I think you probably would like my backlog because it is nothing but me doing things that try to stand out. I have an epic poetry trilogy series. I am working on a book board game combination right now. I am dabbling in graphic novels right now. I am, releasing a science fiction short like pulp series right now. It's kind of like a Japanese light novel. I'm experimenting because to me, like, the big, I think, something I've noticed with what you've said, like, one thing I do agree is authors are it's really easy for an author to make themselves very interchangeable without realizing it, right? Because it's better to try, I think, and again, at this point, this is just my take on things right now, it's better to try and stand out and be different from the crowd. The risk I'm taking when I do that, though, is because I'm doing stuff that's really different, people might not jump on board because it is really that different. But I figure the advantage is, if I find something that really, really, really takes off, it will really, really take off because nobody else is doing it.
Right. Well, they call that creating a genre.
Yeah.
So I have a friend who created a genre of magical romantic comedies with the body, basically mystery romantic comedy, and with magic in it. So she basically created that genre herself, and she found a niche, and she's like the preeminent human in that niche because she found that worked. But it took her dozens of books and before she found one that really took off and a genre that she could fall between. But there is a difference between easier and better.
Yes.
So easier is go write a Kindle Unlimited reverse harem book now, because if you want to do that now, January 2019, it's likely your best chance to succeed in the fantasy genre right now, because that is what people are looking for. That is what people are buying. And within that, maybe mermaids are big right now, or maybe it's a couple months ago it was angels. A couple of months before that it was mermaids or sirens or something like that. So the best chance to succeed is to make money right now is write that book. That does not necessarily mean that it is better to do that, because once you do that, you are then kind of stuck making reverse harem paranormal romance books, which if that's what you want to do, that's great. But a lot of people stuck in a genre they don't necessarily love because they're chasing the quick, easy money. It also means that when the people that are getting a book care less about you and they care more about the story that you're telling.
Which in the long term, I mean, makes it so that the genre is always the brand and you're not. And every author should be at least thinking on some level that they should be the brand at some point.
Or their universe should be the brand. So what you don't want is to fall into making another contemporary YA book or whatever the genre is, because those are the ones that flash in the pan and then don't go anywhere. So there are three ways to basically build a brand that I have found. One is that the company is the brand. So I have a company named Wannabe Press. Marvel is a good example. Like, while there are things inside there, or Ford is a good example. While there are products inside there, the big brand is Ford or Kevlar or something like that. The second way is that the product is the brand. So when the product is the brand, I'm going to go against the thing that I said, but like Rice Krispies would be the brand. Like that's a product. That's not a company. It's a product that a company creates. In this way, it's not about your publishing company and what they create. It's about the space opera universe that you created. And then the third way is that the person is the brand. So for me, I've made my career making me as the brand. Now I would argue it's always going to be partially you. That's the brand at first. But eventually, you hope that something else grows, like a product brings on a life of their own. For instance, like Harry Potter is the brand. J.K. Rowling's not the brand. She's popular, but Harry Potter is the brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Walt Disney is popular, but like
Mickey Mouse.
Mickey Mouse is the brand, and that's sort of how you have to think about how you want to build out your company, or what you want to build out yourself as a creative human. Do I want my product to be the brand? Do I want myself to be the brand, or do I want my company to be the brand? While there are some overlapping strategies between those three, they are also unique and different as to how you go about them.
Absolutely. I mean, the person is probably the hardest of the three. simply because there's almost something about always having to be on, which is tricky because if you're going to make yourself the brand, you have to figure out who you are, who you're comfortable being, and how do you project that to your audience, whoever that is, and in order to do, and that takes, really understanding what you offer and why should people care. Whereas if, let's say, you're highlighting a product, or like say Harry Potter, you can focus on what makes Harry Potter, and you can kind of leave yourself out a little bit. I mean, you're still on some level there, but it's not quite the same thing. And whereas the overarching product, I think when you get to like the Fords, the Marvels, the Microsofts, you're also looking at the fact that these companies have been around a long time. It's almost like the backlog of everything they've done has made them a brand unto themselves.
Right. So the problem with making yourself the brand is that you can't sell you. Like you can, if you ever wanted to sell your company, you couldn't do that. As opposed to a company like Tokidoki, where like the brand Tokidoki is the brand. Like she could sell Tokidoki if she wanted to. She could hire other artists to make Tokidoki. And a really interesting example, though, of a personal brand that also is more than just the person behind it is James Patterson.
Absolutely,
right?
I was just about to mention that when you went down this line. He's a unique thing. It's like his name is on a book. I don't know if he's written anything in the last few years, but his name's on a lot of books.
Right, and other people do that. So I know several people who ghostwrite for other like independent even authors, just because the author wants more releases, but they can't write any more than what they're already writing. I mean, if you're writing, I have friends who put out 10, 12 books a year that are like 100,000 word books, and I don't know how they do that, because it's not just about the writing of the book, it's also about the editing of the book.
Oh yeah.
I could easily write 12 books a year. I can't, maybe not easily write 12 books a year, but I can't edit 12 books a year. Like, there's no way that I could do both of those things. Editing takes half the time of putting out a book. So if I'm able to write a book in 2 weeks, then it takes me a month to write a book. But I can't imagine, and I'm sure there are tricks that they use that they have not imparted to me because I haven't asked, as to like how they do that. Some of them are just like, I write 12 hours a day. Like I write 12 hours a day. That's all I do.
Which no, I have a buddy like that. He does an incredible amount of words per week. Like his word count's insane. But I mean, there comes to like a quality control too. Like, well, I mean, the thing is, once a book is out there, I mean, today we do have the option of re-editing and kind of republishing books if we need to. But there comes a point too that once it's out there, it's out there. So quality. I mean, when someone's doing 12 books a year, I mean, you look at is the 5th book as good as the 12th book? Right? Is it? I mean, or I should say, the 5th book as good as the 2nd book, or is that 8th or 9th book? Like, you just because it happens even with good authors. You get to a point where a book doesn't quite go the way you thought it was gonna go, and that's a huge commitment too. Like to put that much time, and that it's almost like, it's like you're turning yourself almost into a machine. I can't do it. I don't know a lot of people. You are
turning yourself into a machine. I mean, I have the friends who really put out a lot of books. They just they're a machine. Like they write this, that they are there for 12 hours a day, and their books are all very good. Like I can sample any book and not know that it's their 12th book or 7th book or 3rd book of the year. They know what they're doing. They have a streamlined process. And, they are just excellent writers.
Which is awesome.
I have problems doing that. And I think most people have problems doing that because I don't want to. Like, that's not the only thing that I want to do. I've had a podcast in the past. I run a company called The Complete Creative. I own a Verizon dealership. I go to shows. I speak at conventions. All of these things are part of piece of me, and a piece that I want to continue doing. Like I want a podcast that I can run off the back end of my blog and all of those other nice things that fit in my life. It's been I've been doing this for a long time, and there's very few things that I've enjoyed doing. One of them was not writing 12 books a year, and there's another.
Yeah, I understand. I just I get where you're going.
I love my friends who do that. That's what they love. They love getting up at 7 a.m. and writing for 12 hours. I don't have that focus. No. I can write 5,000 words a day, which is 25,000 words a week, which is still means that I can means I can write a 100,000 word book roughly in a month. But that does not include editing. That's all I do. I have to spend 5 to 8 hours doing those 5,000 words, and that's just because I run book marketing for people. I sell courses. I do all of these other things, which are a piece of me. And writing is the biggest piece of me, or creating worlds is the biggest piece of me. But I'm not willing to commit all of me to writing a book. I also make comics, and I also publish things, and I write short stories. All of these other pieces are a piece of me. And it's not unanalogous to somebody who has a job and a kid and all of these other things. They're all pieces.
Yep.
And some people can have the focus. I know Lindsay Broker, and can write 100,000 words a month, or 150,000 words a month, and I'm that's
insane.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I don't know how she does that. Have a podcast, frankly. The level of focus to do that is insanity. I just don't have it, and nor do I want it.
I think that's fair. Most people can't. I've created time for myself to do this and pursue this more personally, but it's also because I also want to do more things. I think most of us, want to go out and just experience things. Like in your case, you have a lot of projects and interests that you're pursuing. But also, for other people, it's about other things. Hey, maybe today I want to go to a rock concert, or maybe today I want to just go out there and do something, because it's just that's a big part of life as well. And it also, I also think too, other experiences outside careers beyond putting pen to paper actually makes your writing better. You might not write as many words, but there might be a little bit more depth there. Again, I'm not denigrating anybody that writes that much per month. I think it takes an incredible amount of focus and discipline, and it should be admired, and it is. But for most people, right, it's not just doing one thing. We need a variety of things to make us fulfilled in one way or the other, just as human beings, let alone, I think, as writers, creators, and so, for most people, just that variety is important, and dare I say, necessary to actually do what we need to do.
I think that's absolutely accurate. I do think that you have to be okay, though, with understanding that you're not maximizing any one revenue stream. So, if you want to be a 6-figure author, you need to release a lot of books that are in market, that are in genre, that you are pushing quite hard. And if you're not willing to do that, that's okay. But the odds of you being a 6-figure author are very low. Because in order for you to make make 6 figures on a $4.99 book, you need to sell almost 30,000 units of any one book.
Mm-hmm.
Or you need to sell 3,000 units of 10 books. Or you need to 1,000 units of 30 books.
Yep.
And like the odds that you're going to be able to sell 1,000 units of a book are a lot better than your odds of making 30,000 units on a book.
Absolutely. I mean that's the this goes to what I say about backlog. That's one of the reasons why a lot of authors are making books now. Even if the books initially don't sell a ton, what eventually is going to happen is sooner or later, it's just, again, odds, you're going to find something that clicks with the audience. And when that happens, people start looking at your backlog. I'm a subscriber to Colleen Duran's Patreon, and she just released some of her backlog in terms of graphic novels and comic books and like just the back issues. And one of the big, and she pointed this out, is like the big money in comics and the big money in a lot of these industries is the backlist, not the front list, right? And because like a single issue in a comic book doesn't sell what it used to at all, but the trades do very well for a lot of books. And
well, the new releases keep the backlist selling.
Yes.
So there's an expression that's, I'm going to probably butcher it, but it's basically the front list keeps the backlist selling, which is why a lot of authors end up maybe even going negative or like being net neutral, even if a book does really well at launch, because what they're trying to do is get people to go back to the back catalog or sell through to the next of their series.
Which is I think a very valid. I think that's the real, and it makes sense. That's where the real money is with a lot of authors. Is the more backlist you have, the more likely somewhere down the road people are going to invest. Like I even noticed this with with my podcast. As I've grown, what I have found is my earlier episodes, which didn't do necessarily as well at the beginning, have grown in views and downloads and everything else because everything I'm releasing now. It doesn't matter if my first episode, how many views my current episode gets. It's the fact that when I release a current episode, people check out my older episodes to boot, right? And as a result, I increase my views, plays, and downloads as time goes on.
Right, well, because it's very hard to promote something that's been out for 2 years.
Yes.
But it's very easy to promote something that's brand new. So every time you're producing something brand new, it allows new people to find it and then go back and remember your other stuff.
Exactly. So the more you do that way, and that makes a lot of sense to me. That's why a lot of authors I don't know if I'll ever do 10 books in a year. I just don't know. I might be doing what you're doing, which is like serializing books, and I definitely see where a serialization is a really popular way of doing things because they make a lot of sense, especially in today's market.
Well, I remember comics. Like I work in comics. Like that's where I grew up. Like I learned how to do all this stuff through comics, and like single issue comics are not. They're not that much different than a 10,000 word novel.
No, they're not, and not even at all.
That's.
Oh, sorry, you can go. Sorry.
No, that's what I'm used to, and I know there are people that buy those single issue comics, but then they also buy the trade.
Yeah.
So, but by saying, well, this is a novel in 9 parts, and then there's a trade of all of it together, and then there's 9 other parts again. It makes sense to me as a person who reads and enjoys comic books and makes comic books and works with people who love comic books and read comic books also in their single issue and trade form. And I know a lot of people who buy both the single issues of a book and then the trade of a book. Yeah. I have creator friends and author friends who, make basically they break even on their single issues and then the trade is all profit.
Yeah.
So all of these things are, which is why I think that it's really important for authors and for all creatives to be cross-disciplinary, because you learn things by doing other things. I mentioned I run a Verizon dealership. It's taught me how to market and sell consumer products, which is basically a book. A book is a consumer good. Verizon sells consumer goods. I sell consumer goods. So it's taught me a lot there about sales and marketing and developing products. I teach and I speak and I do all of these things related to like helping creatives build better careers. So like that has taught me, being on panels with other people has taught me all of this stuff. And I admin a Facebook group for authors called Authors and Creators Making Money Selling Books. And basically it's a free ability for me to get all the resources that I need and provide information for other authors. And I have launched books on Amazon and Kickstarter. I've run all of these things are cross-disciplinary areas that have taught me how to be better doing the thing that I do, and given me ideas that other people may or may not have, and insights that other people don't have. So I highly recommend, writing comic books and poetry and all of this other formats, and working at a restaurant and doing all of these, whatever you have to do to amalgamate a point of view that is unique to you, because doing what everybody else does is not a long-term strategy for success. I literally wrote the book on building a creative career called Sell Your Soul: How to Build Your Creative Career, and one of the parts in it is about modeling success to be successful. So I'm not saying you shouldn't model at the beginning, but when you model success, it's to give you insight to forge your own path. Kind of like how school, and especially college, is to teach you critical thinking, not necessarily how to be an expert in sociology. However, I have a degree in demographic sociology, and it definitely helps me in being and building an audience and all of the things that I do.
Well, I tend to equate, like, I have a day job, I do a podcast, I write poetry, I write novel, I do all kinds of different things. What I find is each thing just builds upon each other. And like for me personally this year, I'm launching my Patreon soon. Even though I don't know, I have no idea what to expect and work and do. I have some ideas how to make it work. But you seek what everybody else did when it gets started. I think a friend of mine, Dirk Manning, coined the phrase, seek what the master sought, and then once you understand it, you kill the Buddha. You try to become your own, you try to master whatever it is, your own genre, brand, whatever the goal is, the actual goal is. You try to get good at that, because once you do that, you stand out. And once you stand out, people notice you.
Right. So there's a thing called the attractive character, which is something that I recommend everybody looking into. It's basically the idea of becoming the person that your audience will attract to automatically, like a magnet. That's a very broad interpretation of it. It's a lot of nuance to it, but you don't get to be that person without putting out work and seeing what people like about you. So part of what you have to do at the beginning of your career is learn what other people have already done. My podcast was called The Business of Art, which has now been renamed The Complete Creative. But The Business of Art was about interviewing creatives about how they were successful and why they were successful, and asking them questions about how they built their audience and what they did in their business model, which is why it probably plateaued at 250 people, because there's just not that many people who want to learn about that stuff. But I desperately wanted to learn about that stuff because I had no idea what I was doing. And that each time I interviewed somebody, I became 1% better. And over 200 episodes that I became way, way better. And in studying and taking courses, I became slightly better at each time until I could amalgamate something that was my own. But at the beginning, what I tell people is, whenever somebody tells you what to do who's more successful than you, just do it. Just do it. Unless it hurts yourself or somebody else, just do it. It may sound stupid. It may sound like it's not going to work. And a lot of these things won't work. But they might work when you modify it to your style. They may work when you understand more in depth about it. Or they might not work at all. But even if they don't work, you at least cut something else out that you don't have to try again. But whether it's your writing or your art or your business, you should always listen to the people ahead of you, because they have learned something that will help you. It may not help you today or tomorrow or next week or next year, but it will eventually help you and hone you from a rough diamond that is worth very little into a precise diamond that you can go and sell at Tiffany's. And people discount the advice that they are given way too often. People come to me all the time asking for advice, and then they never follow through on it.
That's a common thing. I've learned. You've listened to my podcast. I call these the 5 rules. Show up, do your shit, don't quit. The rest is rain. Get out of your own way. I find the one that people tend to discount is the very first one, showing up, which is like taking the advice or just going out and doing the thing, whatever that thing is that they want to do. They're coming to you, hey, what's this marketing advice? And you give them a piece of advice because you've done this and you've been successful at this. Well, they're like, well, I don't know, it may not work for me. Might not, but you don't know what you're going to get until you actually do it. But the moment you do something, I think what a lot of people I think get hit on is whatever expectations they build in themselves when they go out and do something. And that's something a lot of people have to figure out on their own. No one's going to give you permission in this world to do whatever it is you're going to do. You are either going to do it or you will not. Either way, it'll be exactly what you want. And that's always that's something that I think a lot of people have to be very careful of.
Sure. I mean, so I'm making an assumption that most of the people that are listening to this episode are probably at the beginning of their career. Is that accurate? Beginning to middle of their career?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say
okay. So the people at the beginning and middle of their career do maximize their inexperience nearly well enough, because all of the information is out there, and frankly, most people want to help you get to the next level.
Yes.
The problem is there's a rush of information everywhere, and there's so many options and so many things to try. And I think you should try as many as you possibly can and see if it works. Don't go and spend your life savings. Don't go and kill yourself in a way that you won't be able to recover from because you're so burnt out. But you should try all of the advice, because every creator has a little piece. I only have a little piece. The only reason why I'm able to express more than just my little piece is because I have spent so many hours and so much time studying everybody else's little piece. And I can come back and amalgamate from hundreds of creators that I've talked to, interviewed, and studied what they did as a group that worked. However, just because I'm telling you what 80% of people do does not mean that somebody who is a complete outlier won't have done the thing that you need to hear. Because of my degree in sociology, I tend to think of big groups and how they act. But outliers often tell you as much as the group does, if you can find them. The problem is, I just don't have effort or energy to study the people 5 deviations from the mean, because it's unlikely that it will help you. Because they're so far, they were 17 and they were a prodigy and they got a Macmillan book deal at 17, and then by 19 they were a New York Times best-selling author, and then they wrote 4 more books that one of them won a Pulitzer Prize. Okay, well, that's great. That one human is unlikely to be replicated, right? It's like it's unlikely that that one human will be able to be replicated by you. But there are things that you can do which are like best practices, which are the thing that most people have done to succeed. And if you do those, if you find those things, and then add in a couple of the outlier pieces, that's when you really start to supercharge what you're doing.
Which makes total sense, actually, more and more. Mr. Russell, I do think we have an interview here. What do you think?
I think so.
Yeah, okay, so this will probably air, we'll say March, April-ish, somewhere in there. So what'll be out then that people can look at for you, and where can people find you?
I recommend the best way is to go to russellnohelty.com and sign up for my mailing list. You'll get some free books. As far as what will be out then, as far as I know, the Katrina series, which is Katrina Hates the Apocalypse, Katrina Hates the Gods, and Katrina Hates the Universe, will be out by then. You may also get some of the Lobdell Chronicle, which is every planet has a God's Church. There's every reason to fear, and the end tastes like pancakes. There will also likely be a middle book called Sorry for Existing, which is a contemporary YA by that time frame. It depends on whether this Kickstarter that I've done, called Hard to Spell, fulfills. Currently, it looks like it's going to fulfill at the end by the end of January, so I will be able to start releasing at the beginning of February. But fulfillment and these kinds of things are nebulous at like until they're actually done. So the best way to know exactly what's out is to just go to russellnohelty.com. If you are a creative human, I highly recommend going to thecompletecreative.com. If you're an author, I have a blog post called The Secret to Being Successful as a Self-Published Author, which is at thecompletecreative.com/self-published author. I just have a lot of stuff. I just released another one about whether you should release in Kindle Unlimited or book launches. Big blog posts are about 5,000 to 7,000 words long, so they are like very in depth. And my goal is to synthesize all of the information I found and make one resource to rule them all. Because all of the information on a topic of book launches, there's 100 good articles, but they've all got a piece. So I'm trying to synthesize all of them in like one massive place. And that is where you can find my courses, my podcast, and everything else. So between russellnohelty.com and thecompletecreative.com, it should give you a pretty good sense of everything that I'm doing right now.
All right. And that's my conversation with Russell Nohelty. Katrina Hates the Universe will make its debut or re-release March 1st, 2019. You should definitely check him out. Russell is awesome. He's got a lot of books coming out in the next little bit. Definitely keep an eye on him. He's definitely one of the coolest creators on the planet. He really is. And he's one of the most helpful dudes. He's definitely... This conversation was very educational for me. Russell, thank you very much for being a part of my show, and you are welcome back anytime you like. And that will do it for another edition of Just Joshing. However, we're going to do this a little differently tonight. If you want to support the podcast, there are a number of different things you can do to do this. The first thing is subscribing to the podcast. I am on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, Podomatic. You can do whatever you'd like there. Subscribe to any one of those or any other player you'd like. I'll leave comments, share, spread the word about this podcast. That'd be really cool. This is new. I have a Patreon page, or I will have a Patreon page as of March 1st. March 1st is the release of my Patreon. The address is patreon.com/justjoshingpodcast. You can check me out there. I have a YouTube page for podcasts, Joshua Penteloresco. There are currently over 120 episodes you can listen to. I just added Dirk Manning, an oldie from the archive. I've added also J. Nevin Pugh, and the great Sophia Evangelina now is in my archive. So definitely check them out there. You have my books, The Watcher, Storm Dancer, Wandering God, courtesy of MirrorWorldPublishing.com. Check them out. Wait, it's .ca. It's totally .ca. Check them out. I'm also on Amazon. I'm also on Barnes & Noble. I'm also on Kobo. I'm also on Chapters Indigo. I am everywhere. Beyond all that, thanks for listening. And may we be off to great and new and wonderful beginnings.
Josh. Shush.